And let's see. So first question, what is the statute of limitation on downloading MP3s? How long do I have to fear that someone's going to come after my hard drive?
Well, I mean, the RA claims they stopped suing people in 2008. But I think if you have uh, freely downloaded MP3s, I think you will always be somewhat in danger.
Did you fear at any point doing a documentary like this that somebody was going to start looking into your
No,
uploads
because
and
I
downloads?
got rid of my booty years ago.
Years ago.
But it would have been good for PR if they had.
How did you get involved with this topic? What brought you to Napster?
Just being an internet fan from the early days of kind of the civilian internet, which was like for people like us laymen that were just interested in internet community and things like that. It was the early '90s, and Napster was just such a big leap forward for that kind of thing. It was immediately intriguing, and then as the legal skirmishes showed up, and you started to realize that this was becoming an actual youth revolt, um, then I really became interested in investigating it as a story, and this was 10 years ago.
Is it odd because the first time I saw the topic and I'm thinking, oh, is it really that? Is it too soon for a documentary about Napster? And then I was like, oh god, it's been 14 years or
Yeah,
something.
exactly. Yeah, it was '99 when it showed up.
Does it feel like there is no decade divide lately?
There's no decade divide anymore. Not since the 2000s. It doesn't feel like we just sort of blob into new eras, and a lot has changed and not much has changed at the same time.
Now, you come from a background of directing dramatic pieces,
Mm-hmm.
narratives, comedies, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and you're doing a documentary now.
Mm-hmm.
How did your eye have to change for when you were doing an interview and watching how the people you're interviewing were responding to your questions and their answers?
Um, I've done a lot of sort of journalistic TV commercial work, so I was familiar with that. And then as far as the Napster story went, even to write it as a narrative, I did interview a lot of people. Pretty much everyone that ended up in the movie I'd interviewed already for the narrative, just to research the narrative. So, if it's funny, you kind of direct your subjects the way you direct them in narrative too. You want them to trust you. You want them to be at ease. So the process was actually very similar to directing in general. It's just obviously more journalistic. You're going for information.
You didn't have to yell, "Do it bigger" at any point.
Yeah, yeah, faster. Just do that faster. Same thing, but faster. Yeah.
Was it now? How long did you work on the project?
The doc took me a couple of years. Yeah.
And when did VH1 come on board?
At the beginning, I brought them on right away. Yeah, I went and we were partnered on this thing from the beginning.
So that's always a kind of a relief.
It was a huge relief. A, because they were great and they'd made really great documentaries before, and B, because they're within the MTV VH1 family, and I've worked within that family for 20 years. I know, the ins and outs of it, and I liked everyone over there a lot. So it was a really good experience working with those guys.
What was the most complicated rights issue as far as you trying to put this together goes?
I didn't really have, for a doc, a lot of the stuff is fair use. You pay for the stuff that you need to pay for, but I didn't really have any major rights issues because it's really all in the form of a kind of a journalistic exercise. So you have a lot of fair use rights that way.
So you didn't know nobody going, you can't use my stuff. I'm not going to let you talk to
No,
me.
I mean there are people who just didn't want to talk.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really a rights issue as much as a subject matter issue. It's like I don't want to commit myself to this debate because it's a very fractious debate and people tend to have a very strong feeling one way or the other. So a lot of people are afraid to go on camera for this kind of story because they don't want to be, pinned as being on the wrong side of the fight.
Who do you feel was the most defensive in their answers?
I don't really think anybody was. I think that what was really refreshing is that the label people I talked to weren't defensive. I think that they'd lived through enough of this thing and had educated themselves to like what it all meant. I think had I spoken to a lot of people, had I made this a documentary when the Napster thing, when I first got involved in like the early 2000s, I think everyone would have been on the defensive because it was so fresh and everyone was very, very pissed off. But I think the benefit of time and seeing how technology is now being used. Now we live in the age of the iPhone and the iPad and MP3s proliferate. I think that has calmed everybody down. I think they realize this stuff is here to stay and it is monetizable and it's calmed a lot of people down. It's just we still have a lot of fighting going on between litigators and the freedom of the net and internet transparency. That hasn't calmed down. It's gotten worse. But the record industry, I think itself, has begun to embrace this technology more these days.
Now, do you find during your research and talking with not the artists themselves, but the other people around it, did people's do you get an idea that people's musical taste expanded as, quote, the doors were thrown free open
Sure.
and everyone could run it for free, or was it just people narrowcasting even more, trying to get stuff?
Absolutely not. It was a total expansion. The technology was too new to start, drilling down into something that, unless you were just, OCD about 60s miles bootlegs or something. But, really.
I was. So.
Yeah, well, so was I. But I was actually talking about probably largely about myself. Because also I was older. So it was like I was looking for often really specific stuff like, oh, this is a really interesting period of jazz. I want to get into this. But see, the thing with Napster is that would then send you on a journey. Then you would find, through meeting somebody who was into that, they would be like, yeah, but you need to check out blah, 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 blah. And then you would go flying down that road, and that would lead you down another road, that would lead you down another road. Just the sheer technological way that Napster works, the way that it linked users together, user to user to user to user, lent itself to not narrowcasting. It lent itself to sort of following this lattice work all over the place, and along the way, discovering new artists all over the place. So there was no way to use Napster with any length of time and not have your world exploded in terms of other music.
So now, because I know when I started getting into it, it was like bootlegs was
Yeah.
my thing. It
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
because you'd go to like Venus, I guess it was Venus Records up in New York, and they charged $25 for some horribly warped up
Or you couldn't
vinyl.
find it. Or
Yeah.
the thing you wanted, you just couldn't find. I mean, that was
Yeah.
often the case for me. The live recording of so-and-so that I wanted, that I knew existed, did not exist on a record. And I could find it on Napster.
And it was, and you realized, wow, I've got, $8,000 Bob Dylan collection sitting here on my hard drive now
Yeah.
that I didn't have to pay $8,000 for.
Yeah.
It's and in my mind, that was the legitimate reason to download stuff.
Mhm.
The stuff you couldn't get.
Yeah.
The stuff that the radios, especially like live radio station concerts, not the guy who goes in with the tape deck and stuff.
Yeah.
And no one was gonna. The rights issues were all screwed up, so no one was gonna touch it.
Yeah.
And wow, you get a chance to just get it. You can say you're no longer teased by the books,
Yeah.
by the articles saying, "Well, you should have heard this record,"
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
like I can hear it.
Yeah. That's true. It's absolutely true.
Now, was there any point when you were interviewing Shawn Fanning where you looked at him and said, "You're not Justin Timberlake"?
No, that's Shawn Parker.
Sean Parker. Why did I think Shawn Fanning's then? Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever confuse them?
No. It's Aaron Sorkin's fault that you are confusing them, because in The Social Network, he credits Parker with being the inventor of Napster, which he wasn't. That was Shawn Fanning. It's just a mistake. Shawn Parker was the co-founder of Napster, and a very, very integral part of Napster. But Napster, the guy with the nappy hair whose name was Napster, that is Shawn Fanning.
I get the two. It's one of those.
Yeah.
Damn it! And one looks like Justin Timberlake, and the other one isn't being played by Justin Timberlake.
That's right.
Now, how's Shawn Fanning doing now? I mean, here's a guy, he invented, this giant technological leap forward.
Yeah.
How did it affect his future career and, we'll say, earnings?
Well, I mean, both of those guys were totally financially crippled by the Napster experience. The company made no money because they would take no income until they made, deals with artists, and because those deals were never made, they never had any revenue. So the company never made a dime. They never made any money to speak of. They were sued. They were personally sued, so they had legal debt, and they were like 19 years old. So it took them some years to get back on their feet. They're both incredibly bright. They're both, really visionary. So, when guys like that get back on their feet, it's to the tune of tens of millions of dollars, as opposed to ordinary mortals like us. So they're doing just fine.
So they're not, okay. Again, because I had a friend who worked with the guy who came up with BitTorrent.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, wow, this is great. Everybody's using it. And it was like, and he was not doing as well as you. And it's part of that. You have that goof guy now who Yahoo spent $30 million for his little app. And you're like, really?
Yeah.
That's $30 million?
Yeah, it's kind of how the chips fall.
Yeah.
Sort of how that works.
Is it, was it odd when you were interviewing the people, trying to find out, what they're doing after this, and trying to work it into the narrative?
No, not so much. No, I mean, I kind of knew where everybody was. I knew what they had achieved and what they were doing, and so it was just a matter of getting them to just sort of open up about what the experience had done to them.
Now my question, because when you're dealing with today's copyright laws and stuff and who the big guys are, you take a look at Google now,
Mm-hmm.
and they run YouTube. And YouTube's main thing, it seems to be, is to grab copyrighted, have people post copyrighted.
Oh, just 1 second. Hello.
I think good old Frida's like letting out,
Uh-huh.
and they may need to try to get to that exit.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So
We'll take a
I think-
pause.
Yeah.
Okay.